Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. Purdue's losing streak reached 10 games on Friday night to wrap up a 2-10 season. It comes to a merciful end in a 56-3 loss to Indiana. Purdue makes the wrong kind of history with just 3 wins over the last 2 years, marking the program's worst stretch in over 80 seasons. Lots to talk about here today. Big picture of Purdue football, where it goes from here, what went wrong this year. It's a very big post-mortem episode here. Let's dive on in. If you don't, be sure to follow the show on Twitter at BoilersBeyond. There is a lot to talk about this program, about Purdue basketball. We'll touch on Purdue basketball here at the end. Come join the conversation over on Twitter at BoilersBeyond. Always feel free to send in questions to the show. Do that on Twitter at BoilersBeyond. Email me, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. And be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so that you don't miss an episode. But Purdue finishes this season 2-10. And if you ask me, this was the biggest fear coming into the season. That Purdue would start 2-0. The fans would be feeling all right, feeling a little bit of momentum, and then it would all come crashing down as Purdue finishes 2-10, and that's precisely what happened. Of course, it could have been worse. Purdue could have lost to Ball State or Southern Illinois, and the feeling would be even worse, but this really was what you wanted to avoid at all costs if you were Purdue. This was always on the table. This was by no means a shocking outcome, but it's what you really, really wanted to avoid. There were chances to avoid this. Purdue isn't more than a couple of plays away from being 4-8 at this point, and the vibes are a lot different. I don't know that they should be. The difference between 4-8 and 2-10 is vast in the way fans feel about it, but it's only another drive or two on the field going a different result. But nonetheless, Purdue had 200 more yards than Minnesota. Purdue should have won that game. Then 2 weeks later, you can argue that Water should have found its level when Rutgers outgained Purdue by about 200 yards. But it was Rutgers who kicked the walk-off field goal in Ross-Ade Stadium to win that. And at that point, Purdue's fate was pretty much sealed that it was going to go 2-10. There were moments where Purdue competed really well. Purdue gave USC more than it bargained for. That game, it goes both ways. USC settled for a lot of field goals, but Purdue threw 3 red zone interceptions. Things could have changed big time there. Purdue competed really well at Michigan. By no means was this a great Michigan team, but Purdue had Michigan really sweating for all 4 quarters. There were also the disappointments. There was a really non-competitive effort at Northwestern. There was the loss at Washington, where Purdue just got run off the field. And of course, you conclude it with a massive 56-3 loss at home to Indiana. A lot of red in the stadium as the Hoosiers complete a 12-0 season, clinch a berth in the Big Ten title game, and probably, at bare minimum, will get a first-round bye in the college football playoff. Purdue competed well for a lot of the season, but it simply wasn't good enough to scare most of its opponents. As far as Friday night's game goes, there's not that much to say here. Purdue did a really nice job on Fernando Mendoza, I thought. Purdue had the worst pass defense in the Big Ten coming into this week, and Mendoza goes 8 for 15 for 117 yards, couple of touchdowns, but I'm looking at Pro Football Focus after the game, and he grades a 42. That's a worse grade than Ryan Brown had in any game besides Washington this year. The weather played a part in it, but he didn't throw the ball well. We'll see. I'm really, really curious to see what happens when Indiana goes up against Ohio State on Saturday. I have my doubts about that, but Indiana didn't need Mendoza to be good. Indiana could play bully ball against Purdue, and Indiana did bully ball Purdue. It just ran the ball down Purdue's throats. the lack of size and speed on Purdue's roster was on full display. You see these guys, you see Roman Hemby, you see Kalon Black, these guys that are good running backs, but they're not Saquon Barkley back there, and they're just leaving Purdue defenders in the dust. Purdue's just getting manhandled. That's a problem. Indiana came out and ran for 355 yards on 9.6 yards per carry. You don't need to throw the ball at that point. And when you look at where Purdue is, it all starts with the guys on the field. You can make any argument you want, but when you look at Purdue's roster this season, it was not built to compete at a high level in the Big Ten Conference. Look up and down that roster. Purdue didn't give out a depth chart this year, but think about the guys who started. Think about the guys who played a lot. How many of those guys are starters at better programs? How many guys are even getting playing time at Ohio State, at Oregon, at Indiana this year? There just aren't many, if any at all. And when Purdue has been at its best, it hasn't been a program just littered with talent, but it's had those difference makers that you can really use to make up ground. Purdue didn't have those this year. And that's not to say that Purdue didn't have guys who put together really nice seasons, because there absolutely were. There were some really nice performances here. Michael Jackson comes in and, let's see here, he finishes 4th in the Big Ten with 63 receptions. That's fantastic. He had a really, really nice year. Someone who hadn't been able to find his footing at USC in Georgia, he puts together a really nice year. CJ Nunnally transfers in from Akron, has 5 sacks, turns into Purdue's best edge rusher by a wide margin. He was awesome. Purdue's linebacker play. That was the best linebacker play Purdue has had in some time. 2021, Purdue had some decent guys. Jalen Alexander was there. Jalen Graham was there. This is right there with that. This is right there with the Marcus Bailey, Jawan Bentley, TJ McCollum group in 2017. This was a really nice group of linebackers that Purdue had. The special teams. Spencer Porath was great. Jack McAllister had a really nice season punting the ball, aside from the Indiana game. And that's been an area that's been a real problem for Purdue in recent seasons. But you see the limitations. The limitations are clear. How many real difference makers did Purdue have on offense? Did anyone put any fear into opposing defensive coordinators, make them sleep a little bit worse during the week, make them think a second about how you're going to cover somebody, how you're going to approach Purdue? No, Purdue didn't. Purdue didn't to start the season. And then once George Burren and Devin Mockabee suffered season-ending injuries, it got even worse. That tight end position just turned into a relative black hole. I mean, nothing went good there. You saw Luca Puccinelli, or however you say his name, in the bucket game a little bit, but Rico Walker has potential. It didn't click. Those two guys from UNLV are more blockers than anything. The tight end position was a problem. The running back spot didn't do a ton. And of course, when you talk about the running game, the offensive line's part of that too. It wasn't absolutely terrible. I've seen Purdue have worse offensive lines, but it wasn't really a strength either. It wasn't good. And on defense, Purdue just didn't have the athletes. Purdue missed a ton of tackles. A lot of that comes from not being in position, not being fast enough to get in position to square up a ball carrier. You just don't have the dudes out there. And without that, you become so dependent on forcing turnovers, and Purdue did quite the opposite. Purdue never forced turnovers. Purdue didn't do any of that. And it all kind of compounds that when you look at this roster top to bottom, the end result isn't surprising. And it's with the exception of a couple of games, they competed well. That's something you didn't see. That's something you can't say about Purdue a couple years ago in 2024. That roster quit. Purdue didn't quit this year, but it just didn't have the ability to go out and win these games. You saw how thin the margins were. As you look ahead, there's a lot next for Purdue. This is a massive, massive offseason, and if you ask me, it starts at the quarterback spot. This is a huge decision. By all accounts, by everything you hear, by everything you can glean, Purdue is committed at some level to Ryan Brown moving forward. Does that mean you can't bring in any competition? I don't think so. I think you have to bring in some competition. In September, if you asked me after the Notre Dame game where Purdue was at there, I think that was Purdue's first bye, I'd have told you that I think Purdue has something it can roll with in Ryan Brown. Now, boy, I don't know. His season was really a tale of two halves, and it comes at a really interesting time. In the first half of the season, he was pretty good. There were some untimely interceptions, certainly in the USC game. There was a throw against Southern Illinois that got picked off that he just shouldn't have made. But there were some really good moments, too. There were some good throws he made. There were some real competitive juice moments that made you fired up. In the second half, he really struggled. And it makes you wonder, was it the pick six at Minnesota in the fourth quarter of Purdue's sixth game that after that it just rattled him in some way? Was it the injury at Northwestern when he left that game with a left shoulder injury? Did that really impact him? Did teams just figure him out? Did teams just kind of determine, hey, these guys don't have receivers that are going to do much. We're going to really make Ryan Brown make tough throws to beat us? I don't know. But he had 3 games in September with 300-plus passing yards, and he finished with 179 yards per game. That's not great. That's really falling off quite a bit. He did, for his credit, become the first Purdue quarterback since 2016 to start every game. That was David Blau's streak that we've brought up every year in the preseason. You won't hear that on next year's preseason preview because it's no longer a stat. He did that. The management of the position down the stretch was really weird to me. And this is what makes me wonder where Purdue is with all of this, because you started to hear middle of the season or so that, Purdue is pretty committed to bringing Ryan Brown back for 2026, but then Malachi Singleton starts playing more. And what Purdue did at Washington by almost exclusively playing Malachi Singleton, only to come back for the Indiana game, and Singleton only plays 2 snaps. It's all Ryan Brown. I don't know. I don't know. I don't love the situational quarterback things. I think it's really hard to make it work. It didn't work for Purdue. It just didn't. It wasn't a complete catastrophe, but it just wasn't great. And it's part of a big question about the offense. How do you proceed there? Early on, I liked a lot of what Purdue was doing, but the numbers are the numbers here. Purdue finishes with 18.75 points per game. In conference play, that's 14.4 points per game. In the month of November, Purdue scored 4 touchdowns. 4 touchdowns in 4 games. The offense regressed, but the competition also got better. You look at what Purdue played in November, pretty good teams, right? I mean, Michigan's defense is good. Ohio State is excellent. Washington is a pretty good team. Indiana's very good. The competition got tougher too. Purdue moved the ball against some of the lesser teams. Where does Purdue stand with Josh Henson here? I'm sure there's going to be some turnover at the position coaches. There almost always is a little bit. The coordinator spots are big, and I'm very curious to see what happens there. I think it's going to be quite telling about where Barry Odom is with some of this. How does Josh Henson feel about the quarterback spot? These aren't questions you get the answers to, but they're questions I'm very curious about. How does he feel, really? deep down, how does he evaluate this season? You got to find difference makers, though. Whoever you bring in at quarterback, you're probably, and you can hit on guys out of the portal. It's certainly possible. You look at Ole Miss getting the kid from Ferris State, and he leads them to the playoff. You can get guys out of nowhere. That happens. But your running back position is really thin. You have Antonio Harris set to return. Jerron Thomas got a little bit of run in the bucket game, freshman out of Concord High School up in Elkhart. Jaheim Merriweather, second-year kid out of Tennessee. Those guys are set to return. Seems like Thomas leapfrogged Merriweather on the depth chart. We'll see what happens there, but Purdue's got to add to that group. That's a paper-thin running back room. Look at the same in the wide receiver room. Michael Jackson's gone. E.J. Horton's gone. Nitro Tuggle's back. He's the only one who really showed you a whole lot this year of your returners. Got to get guys there. Can you really count on George Burren at this point? And it's a bummer to say that. It is, because he's talented. You see it when he's out there, but he hasn't been able to stay healthy to this point. That group needs help. Purdue needs those guys, even if it's just one or two out there, that make you say, man, how are we going to stop him this week? Do we have to double team him? Do we have to assign an extra man in the box to stop him in the run game? Do we have to bracket this receiver? Whatever it looks like. Purdue didn't have any of that this year. You've got to find guys who can make a difference and help your quarterback out, because there's plenty to criticize with Ryan Brown. I mean, the guy finished with more interceptions than touchdowns, right? We went over the yardage. It declined like crazy. But it's not like he had boatloads of help out there either. It's not like there were guys running wide you-know-what open, and he was just missing them. No, I didn't see a whole lot of that. On defense, I think there's a little more proven that you like that you have coming back, but there's still a lot of help needed, especially at those premium positions. I like what Purdue has as a core on the defensive line. You have Chops Harkless. You have Ian Jeffries, who already announced his extension. Crazy we're using that term, but that's what it is. And TJ Lindsey. That's a nice three-man defensive tackle group to bring back. You need big help at edge rusher. I know there was talk about CJ Nunnally being a JUCO guy, maybe having another year. We'll see. I'd anticipate just you move on. He was your edge rusher this year. He was the only one who really made a big difference. You need help there. I like what you got at linebacker. Charles Correa, Alex Sanford, Sanders Ellis, those guys are back, but you've got to get faster. You can't be as slow on defense as Purdue was. The back end is a big question mark. You lose Tony Grimes. You lose Taj Rael, Miles Slusher, and Darius Coffey, Hershey McLaurin. Some of those guys didn't play a ton, but they're your depth. And those guys are your starters, too, with Grimes, Rael, Slusher. You've got Hudari Hines. You got Smiley Bradford. They look like reasons for future optimism. But there are a lot of question marks on that back end of the defense that you're going to need to fill. You know, year one for Barry Odom can best be described as underwhelming. It wasn't fair to have massive expectations for this season. It just wasn't. He walked into a really difficult situation, a really tall task. He inherited a disaster. That roster had quit. The way the portal went last year, and we'll see what it looks like now that the window has moved to January, but the portal window opening up when it did, and Purdue, it hired Barry Odom on a Sunday maybe? A Saturday or Sunday when UNLV played in the Mountain West Championship game on a Friday or Saturday. I can't remember the timeline of it, but nonetheless, you had a whole week and a half where you didn't have a coach as the portal's going nuts, and you're losing a lot of players, and you were going to lose a lot of guys anyways. That roster was a disaster. You didn't need to keep a lot of them. But it's a complete roster overhaul. There were questionable levels of resources. It was kind of a mess. By no means are there any red flags here about Barry Odom after year one. Purdue's committed to him. It should be. This takes time. The biggest misnomer in this sport right now is that what Curt Cignetti did at Indiana is super replicable. It just isn't. You're going to look at that James Madison roster on Football Reference here in a couple of years of the 2023 James Madison team that Cignetti brought a lot of those guys with him to Indiana. And you're going to have several guys with the NFL logo next to their names. That's unheard of at a G5 school. And he brought a ton of that with him to Indiana. He's hit on back-to-back quarterbacks out of the portal. That is kind of magical. Really, it is. Favorable schedules in there. Barry Odom didn't have any of that. It wasn't fair to expect that. But now, all of those excuses are gone. You have those for year one. You don't have those for year two. Purdue cannot do this again next season. It cannot be this bad again. This is the worst 2-year stretch of Purdue football. Just 3 wins over 2 seasons. The last time Purdue did that was 1941 and 1942. Purdue became just the second Big Ten program in the last 40 years to go winless in Big Ten play in back-to-back seasons. The only other team that's done that since Northwestern had its god-awful stretch in the late 70s, early 80s, was Rutgers in 2018-2019. That can't happen. You can't continue that trend of futility. This is rock bottom. This is historically bad. And of course, what Indiana is doing only adds salt to the wound. Because at least when Purdue has been struggling in the past, Indiana has been too, and oftentimes Indiana has been worse. But right now, that's not the case. They're at polar opposites of the college football spectrum. Nobody, and I mean nobody, is confusing Purdue for Michigan or Ohio State. You look at it. I mean, since Joe Tiller left, Purdue has finished the regular season with better than a 6-6 record twice. The 2 years with Jeff Brom and Aiden O'Connell in 21 and 22. Both years, Purdue finished the regular season 8-4. Outside of that, you're looking at a lot of average to bad football. The Danny Hope era was merely average. The Jeff Brom era was pretty good. The highs were high, the lows were low. But what he did in years 5 and 6 were really nice for Purdue. Darrell Hazel was a catastrophe. Ryan Walters was a catastrophe. That's where Purdue is. And you go back before Joe Tiller. I mean, Purdue went 13 seasons without a bowl game before Joe Tiller got there. That's your last 50 years for the most part. You know, with the conversations being had about the future of conferences and the astronomical money out there in this sport, there's too much at stake for Purdue to be this bad. It starts with the portal. You have to be able to keep the guys you want to keep. That's the biggest telltale sign of where this is headed. By all accounts, Purdue thinks it's in a decent spot from a player compensation standpoint. I'm going to use the term player compensation because it buckles in NIL along with revenue sharing, just all in. Player compensation, Purdue seems to think it's in a pretty good spot. I have no idea whether that's the case or not. Of course, Purdue is a full participant in the House settlement. What type of under-the-table stuff does Purdue have on top of that? I don't know. How well is this all going to be enforced? If you follow this stuff on kind of a nerdy level, this is really getting wild with the college sports commissions and schools basically being asked to sign a form that's going to waive their right to sue the college sports commission. I have no idea what to expect there. But as it goes to putting together a roster in 2026, everything you hear out of Purdue is that it's competitive. Barry Odom says he has everything he needs. Purdue believes it's very competitive here. you're going to get a decent feel based on the guys that Purdue wants to keep. Nitro Tuggle, wide receiver, someone you want to keep. Jerron Thomas, Antonio Harris, couple guys you want to keep there. George Burren is going to be back. He's been hurt so much, I really can't see him hitting the portal. Local guy from Mount Vernon. Can you keep him healthy? It'd be great to get something out of him in 2026, both for Purdue and for himself. Your core on the offensive line. There are guys you want to keep there. Braden Joyner, Joey Tenona, Hank Purvis, I think, has some time left. There are guys you want to keep. Marquise Easley, who did get booted out of the bucket game for a unnecessary roughness targeting, but a former big-time recruit with a lot of potential. Those are guys you want to keep. You've got to get more out of the quarterback position. Just however that goes. 15 touchdowns to 13 picks. It's not effective enough. You need to get something out of the portal at quarterback. If you ask me, if you're not better at quarterback, and there's plenty of reason to think that an offseason with this staff would do Ryan Brown wonders, because we know now that the offensive staff he had for his first 2 seasons was pretty questionable at best, and then he spends the spring with Bill Belichick at UNC in that mess, and then comes back for fall practice at Purdue. This is a lot of new. There's reason to believe he can develop a little bit. Defensively, again, you've got some decent pieces you want to keep. Those defensive linemen, those linebackers, Bradford, Hines on the back end. Those are guys you want to keep. Can you do it? That's going to be a massive tell, because if you watch college football yesterday, Deion Burks has a big touchdown for Oklahoma to tie the game. Max Clare's playing for number 1 Ohio State. Dylan Thieneman had a massive hit in the Oregon game. They're going to the playoff. All 3 of those guys are going to the college football playoff. Clemson had a disappointing year, but you lose Will Helt. Nick Scorton's off to the league now. You can go on and on. Someone tweeted at me, Jimmy Liston went and had a really nice year at Utah State. A little different situation there, but again, guys who have gone on to have nice careers that you'd have liked to keep. You've got to be able to keep the guys you want to keep, both your contributors now and your young guys that are 2026, 2027 contributors. Spencer Porath as well, guy you want to keep. He had a really good year. Got to replace the punter, but Porath was great. There aren't any positions, though, that you look at and just say Purdue's set. You need to add to as many places as you can. I think the hope becomes that you can focus more on quality than you do quantity. Because last year, Purdue had to add such a sheer volume of players. Purdue had so many players it just needed to add to the roster, and it was a little bit the same ahead of Ryan Walters' first year. It wasn't that Brom took all these guys to Louisville. It's just that there was a lot of turnover. Purdue needs to be able to build off what it has now and selectively add to get better guys on the field. The proof is going to be in the pudding here. If Purdue is all in on this, you're going to see a better roster next year. You might have to overpay for guys. It's not like this is a shining star destination. You've got immediate playing time to sell, but you've also won 3 games in the last 2 years. The portal doesn't open until January 2nd. I'm sure you're going to hear guys announce their intention to enter the portal here in the coming days. It sure sounds like you're going to hear guys announcing their return to West Lafayette. As you look ahead to 2026, though, you get 3 non-conference games at home: Indiana State, Wake Forest, and Notre Dame. You want to talk about a massive game. Circle that Wake Forest game. Wake has had a really nice year this year. They win the other day. Let me look. Wake Forest finished the year 8-4, it looks like. I think Wake Forest finished 8-4. Yeah, pretty good, man. pretty good. I mean, that's a program that's had its struggles, and that's who you open up next season with, or excuse me, that's your second game next season. That's a game you're circling. You've got to have, because you're not going to beat Notre Dame. And we've beat that dead horse a million times on this program. We're not going to sit here and talk about Notre Dame for 5 minutes, but you're scheduling a loss there. Got to be 2-1. You just got to be. The Big Ten schedule feels a little more manageable. The home, the home road split. You know who you play at home. You know who you play on the road. The Big Ten has not announced the schedule in order yet. I want to say that happened last December. I don't remember for sure. We'll see when that happens. But at home, you get Maryland, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Washington. Look, Maryland and Wisconsin, depending when you get them, they might have interim coaches at that point. I mean, their schools are running it back with Loxley and Fickle. They're a mess. Minnesota's not exactly great. I mean, that's a game Purdue should have won this year. This wasn't a great Minnesota team. In Washington, they're going to be good. Jed Fish isn't taking the Florida job, so he's going to stick around, it seems. But, boy, I don't know. These teams traveling east, it's been a thing. On the road, Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, UCLA, Penn State. Okay. Illinois loses a ton. UCLA is going to have a first-year coach. Indiana's going to lose a lot from that roster. I mean, it's not like you're sitting here projecting these as wins right now, but if you improve enough, boy, this seems a little more manageable. We'll see what Vegas sets the win total at. External expectations aren't going to be high. I mean, we'll see what the roster looks like, but 3.5, 4.5 win total, it's probably not going to be higher than that. But with a schedule that looks a little more favorable, and if you can retain some of this core, I think you can do some decent things. I'll be fascinated to see where ticket sales come in at. You're asking a lot of fans to keep coming back. You got to do it, obviously. You've got to send out season ticket renewals. You've got to offer season tickets, but it's been a tough couple of years. Purdue fans have showed out remarkably well. It's been remarkably impressive to see what Purdue fans have done here, filling up Ross-Ade Stadium through some really bad football. How full's that place going to be Labor Day weekend next year as Indiana State comes to town? I don't know. We got some questions here on Twitter I'll dive into here. What is the NIL? Where is the NIL in comparison to other Big Ten and Power 4 schools? What's going on with Babinski and Grimes, who caused this disaster? Is Odom the right guy? With revenue sharing, that $20.5 million is going to be all roughly the same. Now, I think everyone understands that. I think the question here is, what is Purdue offering on top of that, kind of skirting the rules? And I have no idea. That's not something, to be fair here, to be fair to Purdue, you can't come out and say that you're offering all of this excess money on top. Like, that's against the rules. You can't come out and say that you're breaking the rules. That's very elementary level of understanding of, bending the rules. But, look, this has been part of it. And this is the answer to several questions I got. I mean, this is part of why Purdue is where it is. When the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 that name, image, and likeness had to be allowed, and it became law on July 1st, 2021, Purdue was not among the leaders on this thing, and I don't know that it was super well embraced by Purdue itself or by Purdue fans. And that's kind of where this all comes. I mean, yes, part of this is the athletic department. Mike Babinski, and we'll never know how involved Tiffany Grimes was in that hire of Ryan Walters, but by all accounts, there was involvement there. But that hire was bad. That hire was a disaster. It is what it is. I mean, I'm recording this as Purdue women's basketball just lost to Central Michigan today. Its second just awful loss of the season. But yeah, I mean, outside of men's basketball and volleyball, there's not a lot going for Purdue athletics right now. As far as whether Barry Odom's the right guy, yeah, I mean, you're going to give him time. Mike Babinski's contract goes through the summer of 2028. I would not expect it to be extended past then. And I think that lines up similarly to what you saw with Daryl Hazel and Morgan Burke, where even if this goes poorly, Purdue's probably not making a coaching change before that point. You're not going to anyways. You've invested in Barry Odom. You have to give him time to try to turn this thing around. You just have to. Absolutely have to. Should we go the smaller route of getting, the route of getting smaller conference seasoned players, or continue to try to get the SEC guys that aren't getting playing time? A mix. There is no perfect way to go about the transfer portal. It's a mix of both. Michael Jackson didn't play much at Georgia or USC. He had a really good year this year. He had more catches this year than I think he had in his whole career prior to this. There's a great example. Nitro Tuggle looks like a nice ad. He has a ton of potential. He flashed it at times. There's a lot to like. Alex Sanford really came on nice at linebacker in the second half of the season. There's an Arkansas transfer. Breon Ishmael came down from Michigan, did some all right things. You brought in TJ Lindsey, Braden Joyner. Those guys both came in from Auburn. Braden Joyner was your center this year and did a pretty nice job there. TJ Lindsey looked good early on, generated a lot of buzz before he got hurt. I get it. I think those Georgia guys from 2024, Nyland Green, CJ Smith, Denylon Morissette didn't play this season. CJ Madden didn't have a big year. Those Georgia guys really soured people, understandably. I get it. But even you go back a year, Kendrick Breedlove came in from Colorado. He might have been Purdue's best defensive player outside of Thieneman and Will Helt, and he ended up at Arizona State. So it's a mix because there are guys from the G5 level that are great. CJ Nunley, we talked about him, comes in from Akron, had a big-time year. He was great. Correa and Powell come from UNLV. They were awesome. It's a mix. There is not a perfect solution to this. I think you want to bring in guys that can be those one-year impact guys from the G5, but I also think with some of those power conference guys, like you see Purdue bring in Marquise Easley on the offensive line and Nitro Tuggle at wide receiver after 1 year at Georgia. Boy, if those guys stick around for a while and you can really develop them, there's something to be said for that too. You got to have a higher hit rate though. However you go about it, you have to be better at evaluation if you're not going to be the biggest paycheck that guys are going to run to. And I don't think Purdue's going to do that. I don't know that that's ever going to be the case. So you have to evaluate well. It's the same as it's always been, right? Purdue has never been a top 5 in the Big Ten recruiting team. It's always got to evaluate well. Where do we go from here with the staff? I'm not calling for Odom to be fired, but do other coordinators or coaches need to be replaced? Any players you hope to see stay? Certainly hit on the players already with guys you want to see stay. On the staff, look, I think Mike Shear is going to be safe. He's a guy who Barry Odom's pretty tight with, was his DC at UNLV. And again, it's not like he had a ton to work with. The question comes back to this, if you ask me. Are you firing guys just to fire guys? Or are you firing guys because you think you made poor hires there? Both of those are kind of equally problematic. There's no point in firing guys just to fire guys. Barry Odom is not desperate here in terms of a guy who's coaching for his job next year and needs to make all of these optical changes that you see sometimes. That's not the case at all. But if there are guys that you feel you can improve upon or guys that are problematic, then yeah, you got to move. And that's not a great spot to be in, but we'll see. We'll see what happens there. My guess, if you're going to put a gun to my head right now, is that Purdue keeps its coordinators and you see some position coach changes. When two coaches in a row show similar results, is there a sign of a deeper problem than any particular head coach? Are we now viewing the failure of the two previous years as going deeper than Ryan Walters' coaching abilities? Yeah, I mean, it's like we touched on a moment ago. I don't know that Purdue was super well prepared for the explosion of NIL compensation across the sport. Now, when you factor that in with a head coach that just wasn't ready for that job, Ryan Walters wasn't ready for the Purdue job. Was he the only problem? Certainly not. I mean, Purdue probably didn't have the funds to go get a ton of big talent. There's the narrative that Jeff Brom quit recruiting and all of that, and I'm certainly not going to say that, the cupboard was stacked with talent, but there are some guys from those classes that have really turned out to be pretty good players. It's very all-encompassing, but let's look at this big picture here. I mean, you take away Joe Tiller and you take away Jeff Brom, boy, I mean, it's been rough. It's not like this has been a program with tons of success. I mean, you're going coach to coach here, and boy, I mean, Ryan Walters didn't succeed. Danny Hope's success was debatable. It's not like he was a great coach, but he had his limitations too with Purdue's investment in football. I'm looking sequentially here. I mean, Darrell Hazel was a disaster. Jim Coletto flamed out. Fred Akers was a terrible hire. Like, you're looking at this, and boy, I mean, since Jack Mollenkopf, you've had 3 coaches leave with a winning record. Jack Mollenkopf left in 1969. That tells you a lot. Purdue hasn't had a 10-win season since 1979. Not great. The Big Ten money is awesome, and being a part of the Big Ten for Purdue is massively important right now. It's why, as you look at this private equity deal or the California pension system deal that Michigan and USC kind of got pushed back, if you're Purdue, anything that extends the Big Ten grant of rights and locks you in, you pretty much have to support. But competitively, I mean, it's not the best thing for you to be when you look at where this conference is. You're fighting an uphill battle. And then finally, the last question, around 80 new players from the portal in high school this year. It's not abnormal in this era. There's some individual talent on the roster, but surely some guys who shall move on. How do you navigate always having new players while trying to build for the future? That's just part of the sport now. That is part of college football. You're going to have roster turnover, and it's not going to be 80-some guys. You're going to have your graduates, and you're going to have your portal deflections. And sure, that may add up to 30, 40 guys, but you're always bringing in your high school class. And for Purdue, I can't remember off the top of my head. I'll pull up on 3 real quick. See where Purdue is with commitments. It's 20 or so, I want to say. Doesn't even tell me right off the top here. 21 commitments for Purdue this year. So say Purdue signs them all this week, and National Signing Day is this week. Talk about a change in the landscape. It's National Signing Day, and you don't even think about it. But Barry Odom should be very well qualified to do this stuff. At UNLV, he dealt with tons of roster turnover, and that's just part of it. If you can keep your core guys around, it goes a long way. Keep your coordinators intact, and you're running a lot of the same stuff, and you can really get players familiar with a system, something Purdue hasn't had. God, Purdue's had so many defensive coordinators in recent years. Even you go back to Brom, since Nick Holt left, it's been nuts. Some familiarity goes a long, long way there. We're in the final stretch of 2025. It's already December. Christmas time is here. We're all checking items off of our lists. This year, did you review your insurance program? If not, the time is now. As an Indiana Farm Bureau insurance agent, I'm here to make sure your insurance program is exactly where you need it to be. Give me a call at 317-846-5861 or email me, jordan.jones@infarmbureau.com. Let's make sure you're all set for 2026. On to a much different aspect of Purdue athletics. Basketball blew out Eastern Illinois on Friday. I really don't have any takeaways besides this. Purdue turned it over a lot early on. Very classic Black Friday noon tip-off after you get back from the Bahamas type of deal. And then once Purdue stopped turning it over, it was an utter massacre. Eastern Illinois is terrible. I get it. That's the worst team Purdue's going to play all year. But it just reminds you how important taking care of the basketball is for Purdue. It becomes paramount this week when you go to Rutgers on Tuesday. This is a big week. You've got your Big Ten season starting. You have Rutgers this week. Then next week you have a midweek against Minnesota at Mackey. Of course, in between that is a massive game with Iowa State that we'll get to. But Purdue's had its very well-documented struggles in these first Big Ten road games of the season. An overtime win at Nebraska in 2023 is the only one of these Purdue has won since the Big Ten went to the 20-game scheduling model in the 18-19 season. You can't lose this game. You just can't. Rutgers is not good. Purdue's a 15-point favorite when you look at the KenPom projections. That's really big for a conference road game. Rutgers lost to Central Connecticut State. It got blown out by Tennessee. It really came back late to make a Notre Dame game look a little more palatable than it was early on. Rutgers isn't good. It just isn't good at all. We'll see. This is the game where Purdue's going to get tested in the sense that Rutgers is going to throw everything it has at Purdue. If this is a classic Steve Peichel team, which last year's team really wasn't, Rutgers is going to be physical as all get out. Oscar Clough might get hit over the head with a 2x4. I don't know. But that's what you get when you go to the rack. And Purdue has to overcome that. Purdue has to take care of the basketball. And if Purdue plays well, it has nothing to worry about. And it's going to win by double digits. But you look at the Big Ten, and Michigan just had an awesome week. I don't know if Michigan will be number one tomorrow in the AP poll, but certainly has a case. That Players Era performance was incredibly impressive. Michigan State looks good. Illinois is going to be in the mix, I think. We'll see. But everything matters for the Big Ten race, and you can't afford to pick up a bad loss early on. Real marquee game on Saturday with Iowa State. That is as big of a non-conference game at Mackey as I can remember. A noon tip-off on Saturday, Purdue, Iowa State. You look at KenPom, where it's number 2 Purdue, number 4 Iowa State. That's huge. I mean, that is a awesome non-conference game. That's going to be a great atmosphere. But, Iowa State's undefeated. It got good wins at the Players Era. Iowa State forces a ton of turnovers. It makes a lot of shots. That's a big-time game. That's a huge game. It's fun. Purdue scheduling this way in the non-conference is a lot of fun. It's a big week. Obviously, it's funny how that Rutgers game is so much bigger than the Iowa State game in the realm of things, even though Iowa State's going to be a top 5, top 10 matchup. But that's all I've got for today, guys. This was a long one, I know. Just a lot to talk about here with Purdue football. Moving forward, obviously, the conversation is going to be much more centric on Purdue basketball, but we'll keep you up on all the news with Purdue football, with coaching changes, if any, with the portal, with recruiting. We'll talk about everything here along with a steady diet of Purdue basketball. Be sure to follow on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond. Always send me questions. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Enjoy the basketball this week, guys, and we'll talk next week. Take care.